Hello, and welcome to the North Shore Podcast. My name is Jaden.
My name is Lauren.
Unfortunately, Tina Fey could not make it this week. She wanted to be here, but on her way, she passed a school bus of children teetering off a cliff at the Grand Canyon and is heroically saving them all from certain death. But we have an even better guest this week, Vanessa Lengies, the iconic Canadian actress from Glee, Stick It, Are You Afraid of the Dark?
The Perfect Man.
American Dreams, voice on Arthur.
Lego Star Wars.
Amazing. So she's here to talk to us about differences in the Canadian entertainment industry versus the American industry and her experience.
Mm-hmm. But before we get into that, we're going to have a brief moment to touch on the Canadian Screen Awards.
Yes.
Nominations just came out last week, I believe it was. If you, like me, were very, very disappointed in the Oscars' choice to not air 8 of their categories and kind of signal that, you know, they don't really take as seriously sound editing, production design.
We don't need sound or design.
No,
or
why we don't need editing? Actors can just also show up in whatever clothes they're wearing. Who cares? But if, like us, you were disappointed in that decision, we highly recommend that you tune in to the CSAs. They have 145 categories ranging in Canadian television, film, and digital media. Highly recommend you check it out, support some Canadian content, pay attention to what's happening, and check out a show that actually is invested in giving everyone their chance to shine.
Yeah. It's kind of nice that it's not all segregated.
Mm-hmm. The CSAs were originally split into the Genies and the Gemini Awards, one for film and one for TV, but they have bridged them together and brought in digital media as well. So it is really refreshing to see a show that is putting everyone kind of on the same level. There doesn't seem to be as much of a hierarchy between film being lofted versus TV versus digital media. So yeah, we also wanted to shout out a couple films and TV shows that got some good accolades. For Best Motion Picture, you've got Drunken Birds, Night of the Kings, Night Raiders, Scarborough, and Wildhood.
And on the TV side of things, we have Sort of leading the nominations with 13, which is very exciting. Pretty Hard Cases and Winona Earp with 11 nominations each. And then Coroner and Kim's Convenience both have 10 nominations. There's a lot of CBC. I do also want to say that reading the nominations made me feel like a bad Canadian content consumer. Because I was looking through them and I was like, oh, I thought I was someone that was kind of like up on all this stuff, and I know very few of these.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole other conversation to be had about the accessibility of a lot of the stuff that's airing, and what makes it to theaters. But I think that's a conversation for another day, maybe.
So, I guess without further ado,
we're going to get into our interview and discussion with Vanessa Lengies. So we hope you enjoy.
Hi, Vanessa.
Hi, Jaden.
How are you?
I'm so good. It's so good to see you.
It's really nice to see you. I really appreciate you coming on here. It's very kind to give up your time to be with us.
It's very Canadian of me.
When Jaden told me that you were coming on, I was like, oh my God, Stick It was huge for me as a teen. The amount of times I wander around, be like, it's not called gymnastics, which I'm sure you hear so many times.
I love it every time I hear it.
Yeah.
It's the best line in the movie.
It is the best line in the
that
movie.
it was mine.
Yeah, the best character in the movie as well. You absolutely killed that role. I love that film.
And chocked full of Canadians too, Missy Peregrine and I.
Mm-hmm.
I just watched it for the first time last week actually, which I feel a bit ashamed for, but I loved it. And you were
so
my favorite
Jaden, you've watched every single thing I've been in the last week.
Yes.
That's okay. You got to know me as a person first.
Yes, exactly.
What did you think of Stick It?
I loved it. Yeah, it was very 2000s.
Right? It's classic.
It was really, really fun to watch. And you were I feel like your personality fit perfectly with that role.
Should I be offended?
I think, I guess maybe that is offensive. Maybe the latter half of Joanne.
The comedy.
When she does the turn.
Like the realized Joanne.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Exactly.
Okay, Jason. Okay.
How much of the gymnastics did you yourself actually do, or was that all a stunt person?
I had an amazing stunt person, Annie Gagnon from Montreal, another Canadian.
Awesome.
And I did a lot of gymnastics. We trained for 5 months before we even started filming that movie.
That's
wow.
awesome.
It was just a lot. It was a lot.
Monday to Friday, or how?
It was 5 days a week training, all day long
Wow.
for months. And then on the weekend, we were expected to do like cardio and stretching and things like that. It was wild.
For me, that would be my ideal situation in order to get fit, is like getting hired for something where they're like, you have to get fit and you're doing the work. Because if someone's not being like, here's your goal, I'm paying for you to do it, I'm not going to do it.
I'm not doing it. No,
like,
I completely agree.
Yeah,
I don't think I've worked out since, oh gosh, pre-pandemic, let's say. But after Stick It, my back was a triangle.
Oh yeah.
Like, so I went from a string bean to just like,
It's like solid.
I was so solid. I remember my grandparents coming to visit me in Los Angeles and like picking up their bags at the airport like it was feathers, just like tossing it into the car.
Doing cartwheels with their luggage.
Oh my God, I'd pick up everything for everybody and look at me.
I was definitely showing off. And then that quickly faded.
I want to start off with a question for both of you. What is your favorite piece of internationally successful Canadian content? Vanessa, I'll start with you.
I'm going to say the most obvious, which is Schitt's Creek. I just feel like as a Canadian watching it, I felt proud that it was as popular as it was so that people could feel into what we have to offer in Canada. I also loved how inclusive it was, obviously, and that's a show that people in the States for sure go, oh, that's Canadian, right? Like, there's this connection there, and I really enjoy that. I'm proud of that. Other answers are just like shows from the 90s that I loved growing up. So I don't think those count, and I'm not sure if people here know about them. Except for Are You Afraid of the Dark? People in the States know about Are You Afraid of the Dark because they recognize me from that.
What's your favorite?
I didn't pick a film or a TV show. Mine is one of my favorite albums of all time, Jagged Little Pill. I don't know if I would say it feels distinctly Canadian in what it's maybe. I think it's just like...
It's moody.
It's moody.
But you feel like it's Canadian.
It's aggressive. I love kind of just the unpolished rage, but also a brilliant control she has in her voice. I remember that just like listening to it in the car constantly on like every road trip, at like every car ride I was ever on as a kid. And I'm just like very grateful to Alanis for giving a little girl like a great, like aggressive, varied, complicated woman to just like unleash, which was really great. Love it a lot.
Mine's kind of in the same vein, which is Let Go by Avril, which is not a surprise.
No, not at
knowing
all.
me. I was struggling like what to answer because there are other things I'm very proud of that are Canadian, but when I think of like kind of global influence, and nostalgia is obviously a part of it too, like it brings me back to a very specific time in my life. I think that album is kind of like what I feel proudest of. My honorable mention was going to be Jagged Little Pill as well. Because people always say that like when comparing her to like Britney or Christina, like around that time when she came out, that there was no one else kind of like Avril. But Alanis was like a precursor to Avril in terms of that like kind of angsty, moody young woman vibe. And in terms of global influence, like Let Go sold 16 million copies worldwide. Jagged Little Pill sold 33 million copies worldwide.
It's huge.
Like it's a huge album. I feel like it's not really fair just to mention Let Go without also mentioning Alanis and the like influence she probably had on Avril as well.
And I guess actually, now that I'm thinking about it, the whole like we are pretty well known for having really great like punky female vocalists over here, whether or not they like get really, really huge. But we've got Fifi Dobson, we've got Alanis, we've got like I remember didn't make it as big, but like Sky Sweetnum was big for me when I was a teen. Like Avril, we've got a pretty good roster.
Vanessa, the ultimate angsty goth.
Super angsty.
Yeah, when's your album dropping?
And one more follow-up question was, is there like a piece of Canadian content that you wish more people knew about that you personally enjoy or appreciate?
Something that I want people to know is that a lot of the sitcoms that we enjoyed in the US, the leads were scouted at the Just for Laughs festival. Like a lot of them. Like I think they used to use that as a formula of how to make the next great sitcom is go to the Just for Laughs festival, watch people, find somebody's funny, and then develop a show around them being the lead character. I know that's how Everybody Loves Raymond happened, and and I just think like the festivals and like Jazz Festival and Just for Laughs Festival, and there's just like real, and like even Cirque du Soleil, there's this I'm from Montreal, obviously, so this is where I'm basing this from. But I just want people to know the origin stories of a lot of content that they love that has roots right in the heart of Montreal as the cultural center for all this like comedy and circus and music and
Yeah.
This is a weird one. This is the only one that kind of popped into my head because I've been really wanting to watch it again. But the Denis Villeneuve film Enemy is one of my favorite films of his, and I think he's become a massive director. Another Quebec talent, which I think you get like Quebec makes an incredible amount of like really cool creative artists, which is really awesome. I think because it's
vaudevillian circus based. Like when you think about even film, the origin of film, it's all okay. We had a theater, we had a show, and then we started being like, should we film the show and the sets and the whole thing, how it developed. And Quebec's circus beginnings, theater beginnings is like, I believe is why there's just so much structure set up for people to be creative, like in these like wild ways, I think.
It has a bit more of a European sensibility, and I find that there's a lot more freedom of like the types of content and just like the creativity that you find in
and also the legacy and lineage of different art forms, right? Like and maybe it's because the French language like preserves some of that European, like some of the things that came over, but it feels like this person, like there's a lot of miming schools in Quebec too, and just like this person was an apprentice of this person and this was their skill and this got passed on and then they made this play. And I don't know, I feel like there's a density to talents and tools and styles. In Quebec, I felt like there was always like access to something from a different era that we didn't really understand, that was part of our pop culture. We didn't understand the roots of it, but it was like it was there, so you could feel it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're getting out.
I think my pick is a TV series called Cardinal. It's just like this really beautifully shot, really well written, like Northern Ontario moody crime drama. It's so like beautiful and like stark, and in one way it was very Canadian because of like the moody landscapes and kind of the slow moving like nature of it, which I feel is kind of a quintessential Canadian element of a lot of our film. But yeah, it did get picked up in Hulu in the States and BBC in the UK, but I find, at least here in Canada, whenever I ask anyone if they've seen Cardinal, they're like, no.
I haven't either.
Yeah, but it's so good. Like it's
I
so
see
good.
It everywhere.
I believe you. I would want to watch it. I mean, I'm getting to know you gravitate towards moodier things, Jaden.
I'm a moody boy, yes.
You're a moody boy. I also wanted to just write, I just wanted to say honorable mention, Student Bodies was our Saved by the Bell. I wanted to mention Radioactive because I did that show for 3 years and it was like so weird and so cool. I wanted to mention Due South. Do you remember that show? I think that was a great show. I used to love that show. Street Sense. Do you remember Street Sense?
Oh my God.
I'm getting so much education. I'm like, okay, I have to write all these down.
No, okay, so I'm just dating myself. But Street Sense was this awesome show that taught kids about how to judge what things should be valued at, test different products to show about quality. It was like money. They would talk about investments and money, but they would do it in a really fun way, which I just like loved and doesn't exist anymore. So I wanted people to know about Street Sense. And it was also filmed in Halifax, which was cool because they would talk a lot about Halifax, which we got so much American content, right? So you're just like hearing about Texas and Florida and all these places, but it's rare in Canadian shows that they would like talk about places in Canada.
You brought up earlier like being from Quebec, which I wanted to touch on because when I was doing some research for this topic, time and time again, I would read about the differences between like Quebec's like star system and celebrity culture and like what they produce versus English speaking Canada, that there are celebrities in Quebec that like English Canada just like doesn't even know exist.
About.
But it's
they're
like
really famous and they like sell out concerts.
Yeah, there's like a really, really robust like film industry as well. Like I remember the first time I went to Montreal seeing like ads for Bon Cup, Bad Cup 2 everywhere, and it was huge. I'm like, I can't believe I've never heard of this. It's massive.
I want to say about that is Radioactive, the television show that I was on, that I was talking about on YTV, was actually a French show that was so popular that the company was like, we should make this for English people. And so they just cast English people and copied. It's like how we take British shows and we remake them, like the British Office or whatever. I think that French TV was so popular that they carbon copied a lot of it in English. And we know the English versions of a lot of French shows.
Now, did you spend any of your career in Quebec?
Yeah.
So
all of it until I was 15.
At that age, like, do you think that was something that you kind of like recognized? Maybe once you left, like, did it become clear about how different like Quebec was?
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny. I started working so young, and Cinar is so actually when I Googled Canadian content to just like get like what's the Wikipedia page say about this, and it has this whole piece on Cinar, which was basically why I'm an actress, is that I got hired to be a voiceover actress for this company, Cinar, and this company made French television, English television, cartoons mostly at first, and it felt like a family. Like once I got hired to do my first voiceover job with Cinar, there was like, okay, and now you can do a voice in this show and a voice in this show, and then we made Canadian Lassie different from American Lassie. Corey Sevier, who I worked with you.
Yeah, that's where we met.
It's so funny. The original Timmy. We should have, well, I'm making right now a shout out to Lassie, Canadian Lassie, and Corey Sevier. All that to say is like when they did that, and then they were like, hey, Vanessa, here's a job on screen. And so it just kind of was like a family that I was being ping-ponged around inside of, which felt great.
Yeah.
And then when I left, you realize, oh, that's not how it happens elsewhere.
Yeah.
Everything is much more separate. In Quebec, when I was working, you would do everything you can to keep the ball moving, right? So if I had to adjust a light, I'd adjust. If this person needed this chair moved over here, oh, let's move the set. Everybody's lifting the set, moving the set. It's like we are creating something together, no matter what your role is. And when I came and started working in the States, that is very different. Like everything is like, if that's not your job, you don't touch it. You don't have a say in it. You stay on your side of on the street. You're an actress, that's what you do. And even like dressing rooms was a big surprise to me. In all of my acting in Canada, we shared the dressing space. It didn't matter if I was working with somebody who had been in like all of the major Canadian films in the last 10 years and she was like mega famous. We were dressing together like you would do for a play. And then I came to the States and it's like, no. Everybody gets their own space, whether it's a tiny or whatever it is, however big it is, it's your own, it's separate.
Yeah.
Which I found interesting.
I was gonna say that feels very like theatrical to me, and very communal, that kind of sense of collaboration. I've noticed that even in film here, just working in different unions, because I'm in the Directors Guild, but I've worked with IATSE and with NABIT, and NABIT very much has that kind of sense that you talk about where it's like, oh, like props needs this, can you come in, like fly in from another department and just move it because we need to get it done. Whereas on IATSE, I think like there was one day we needed a photograph taken of an actor. Someone didn't know the rules and had asked someone in our department to just like go take a picture. And before she went, she got pulled aside. She's like, you absolutely cannot do that because you're stepping into now the stills photographer's role. Yeah. So it's very separate.
Yeah, I remember getting yelled at. It's so vivid because I was so like scared for moving my mark. Like picking up my tape mark on the ground because my position had moved, so I just picked it up to move it. And they yelled at me. I was like 15 or 16 or something, and it makes me. I understand that they're protecting people's jobs, but I think as a creative person who thrives from the team mentality, I think it sucks. It really makes me sad. And I've been working here, since I was 15, so I'm fine, I guess. But it does. I do like miss, and I feel grateful that I had the experience of being able to just be like, everybody's in this together. We're trying to make something great here.
When we first met, it caught me off guard a little bit because when we met, I hadn't had much experience working in the industry, but it had been very cemented into me, even though I'd been doing lower budget, non-union stuff. Like, this is your job. Like, do not like talk with the actors outside of like very strict kind of rules, you know. And so when you're so friendly and so like communal and so like wanting to like get to know people on the crew, it was really nice. And I was like, are we like allowed to do this? Is this like okay? And we talked a bit about this on our last week's episode with Rachel, who's also an actor. We got into a little bit like how it really creates this divide between like the above the line and below the line, which in some instances I think can be, you know, like the nature of the job is very different. Like being an actor is very emotional. If there's like a kind of scene that you need kind of that isolation, like it should be allowed for, but I don't think it just kind of creates a weird like you over here, you over there, and it's like kind of odd how normal it is, you know?
Yeah, and I think about it, and I wonder, and I'm actually just kind of realizing it in this moment. Is it because of my upbringing in Montreal that I have this desire to feel connected to the crew and to everybody who's on the project, or is it like something else? I feel, and listen, I've worked with tons of actors who don't want anybody to talk to them or look at them. So if I were to be like that, I would think I was wasting my life. Like I'm wasting my time if I'm actively trying to not be connected to people. Like what a waste. Then I'm just with myself.
I'm curious to know, like, because you've done work in Quebec, you've done work in English-speaking Canada, and you've done work in America, what really shocked you, or what like was a surprise about how those function in different ways?
I would say my experience in Quebec felt the most like a family and a circus. Like I used the word circus a couple times and realizing that was like very much the vibe. I love the crews of Vancouver, and I think I'm going to use the word pillaged. Vancouver has been such a hotspot for filming over the past few decades that this kind of sounds dark, but like their crews are being used. It's like the formula's here. Like, okay, the American show comes in and we do all of this work and we work crazy. We don't see our families and the hours are insane and it's cold and we're outside and then they just do it again and again and again and again and again. There's just like so many series that film in Vancouver. So that's like the vibe I get. And I just filmed there last year and I loved my crew so much, but I think it took a little more for them to warm up to me, because I think there's this mentality like you're just going to be gone next year, which is actually totally true. I know why. Because in Quebec, when I was working there, it was it was like your show was picked up for 3 years.
Really?
It wasn't like, oh, if your show goes, we have to wait to see if it does well, and then you get a second season. It was always, anything I filmed in Quebec was like, no, we're doing 3 years of this show. That's just like, and they do the same thing in the UK, right? Where they're like, no, we bought 3 years of this series, right? This is very common, but that's not true in Vancouver. So there is like this, like, I don't want to like open my heart here because I don't know how long I'm going to be in this with you.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what my take on it. And then in the States, here there's a ladder. In the US there's a ladder. So if you do if you're a sound man and you do Stick It, then now you have your resume and you're like, I did the sound on Stick It, and people are like, oh, okay, cool. So your next goal is to do the next rung. And same with acting. It's like, oh, okay, I did this, now I'm going to do the next rung, whatever is a little more elevated than the last thing I did. That's the kind of form it takes here. Whereas in Canada, who cares? You're going to do what work comes your way.
Yeah.
You know, I did the sound on Schitt's Creek, and they're like, yeah, okay, cool. Now we're filming Holiday Miracle, and you're gonna do the sound on this. And like, okay, you know, and it's just, and that was true of me as an actress too. When I was from 7 to 15, like I literally will do whatever job comes my way. It's just that the ladder system isn't in place.
Yeah, well, I think that, you know, that kind of speaks to a big difference between Canadian content and American produced content, is that our industry is so reliant on government assistance and like funds and grants and stuff. And like I was looking on the Canada Media Fund's website, and any successful Canadian show like Kim's Convenience or Schitt's Creek or Working Moms or Cardinal, being Erica, a Baroness von Sketch Show, whatever, anything, it all has like millions of dollars of government assistance. And so I think because there's such a reliance on it, like Rachel said last week, the ceiling is only so high here. Like we wouldn't get like a Euphoria or a Station 11 or like a $100 million series. That speaks to why people end up leaving. I mean, money is an aspect of it too, but just kind of like that fulfillment of wanting to go to the next rung of the ladder it exists to a point here.
Yeah, it feels more lateral though. You're kind of, like you said, you're kind of moving kind of more lateral, and there's the occasional step up, but unless you're willing to hop on like a production from the States that's coming over to shoot here.
Yeah.
Which can like elevate you a little bit, but there's only so long that that's ever going to run. The first two shows that I worked on when I started in the industry were both American shows that are planning to start here and filming during COVID, because one bonus about the Canadian film industry is we were very, very COVID safe and a lot of stuff moved over, but they were only going to be doing it temporarily. And the plan was eventually either when COVID dies down or they get enough money that they're going to move back to the States. So I think that also speaks to the way that people work in Vancouver, where it's like, we can't be too precious about the relationships we build here. We don't want to get too invested because it could, like, you could totally move. Like, I love in Quebec, I wish we did that here too, where you order up 3 years of a show. That gives you so much room to breathe, so much room to like develop a story. How are you supposed to figure out?
Everybody gets invested.
Yeah.
That's the thing. You articulated that well about the Vancouver thing. It's like they can't get invested. Hurtful. It's sad to get invested because it's a revolving door and things can get plucked or moved or whatever. Yeah. And I wonder if they still, I haven't done a show in Quebec since I was 15, so it's not here. And I wonder if they still do that.
Having worked in the three industries, is there anything that you think that that Quebec does really well, or Canada does really well, or the US does really well, that you want kind of to transfer into the other industries?
I mean, I miss read-throughs. When I moved to the States and we was first doing American Dreams, we did a read-through for every episode, and then we did a viewing when the episode would come out with the crew, so the crew saw. They did that with Glee too. We always had read-throughs, and we always screened the show when it was coming out. I've worked on a lot of shows in Canada in the last few years, or movies in Canada, where a lot of the crew hasn't even read the scripts. So when I say read-through, not just like cast read-through, I'm talking about full, everybody's there. We read it together. So the vibe is shared on the same page. And then if anybody has creativity that they want to bring to it because they know the story, they know the thing, then they can add. It's like it adds to the possibility of collaboration.
It seems like you're really passionate about like having that kind of communal vibe,
like the ensemble vibe. I think that's very much.
I mean, you're a human being, right? And so let's say I think so. I might not be. So I'm just checking. No matter if your job is to do the craft service table, I know inside your heart you want to be a creative person. I know if you're in our business, like there is something in you that's like, I want to create.
Do you want to like produce your own stuff? The reason why I went to like why I was so passionate about it was like, well, do you see that for yourself ever kind of stepping into that role of like creating a production?
The truth is, whenever I get a job, I am actively trying to create that from my position. And you witnessed it. It's like, hey, let's get to know each other. Hey, what do you think about this thing we're making? And then getting everybody together and having hangouts that foster connection and magic and electricity that then funnels into this thing we're making. It's like, I do that with my being. And your question about if I want to produce or write is like, the answer is like a full, hard yes. But my insecurities are, hey, I was a 7-year-old little thing. I got put into this business and I've just been acting ever since. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to do that. I've just been doing this. And then we have conversations like this. And I actually have a lot of stuff in here that I would like to put into being a leader in that sense. But insecure about it too.
But you have produced your own series because you did do The S Word with Vanessa Lengies, which I watched. You had like you got. I remember that the one my favorite moment in I think it's the first episode, and you're talking about like the guilt, but also the excitement that like I got all of this crew together just so I could ask these specific questions, and I'm like, but that's what it's about.
Yeah, the S Word was interesting because my friend called me and was like, they're looking for female-generated content for this web thing they want to make. Do you have any ideas? And at the time, I was like, I wish there was a place where they were talking about these different aspects of sexuality, but not in a salacious way that would just be like trying to be flashy, but in a way that was more grounded and personal and asked these kind of questions. And she was like, I love that idea. Will you write it up? And I was like, sure, I'll write it up. And then we were about a week or two before we started. And she helped me produce it, my friend Amanda Donenfeld. So I didn't have to do things that I think are complicated. I just kind of came up with it and then like worked with her, you know, we had meetings and stuff. And then they were like, what if we made it about you? So it wasn't the intention to make it about me. And it freaked me out to make it about me. And when I look back and listen to it, I feel like I'm listening to a baby version of myself. Language is coming out of my mouth that I've never spoken before. Just tripping over my words, not being able to articulate what I'm trying to express. And it's also very personal. So that one is, it kind of just happened in a way that I don't know how I got to make it happen. It just happened. And it was like a lot.
Well, I think from a viewer perspective, at least, like I think you really did achieve, if your goal was to kind of create a space where people could have those conversations in a way that like feels more grounded and feels more true to life. I think you did a really good job doing that. So
my favorite episode was the one where you're talking to a priest about sex, and it was like, these are like kinds of conversations that I love to see, and like there's no real salacious tone about it. It just feels like two humans in very different places coming together to have this really interesting conversation. I just thought it was really well done.
Thank you so much. That's really was my intention. So I'm happy that that's what came across. Sometimes it's hard to see that yourself, especially when I'm looking back and feeling like insecure about many other aspects. It's nice to actually hear that the intention was met.
A lot of our exports to the States in terms of our celebrities, it's like very white a lot of the time. And because I know your background is Egyptian, where does like the Egyptian background kind of play into how you feel about your own Canadian identity? My
personal experience with my ethnicity and acting, nobody knew what Egyptians looked like in like a pop culture sense. So my differences just lended themselves to be like, okay, you're gonna play the Italian character, when you're gonna play the Mexican character, and you're gonna play the Polish girl, and like you're gonna play this mixed character. We're moving into a place now where it's becoming less acceptable to portray another person, like a race that is not part of your background. But that was like part of that was part of the bonus for me of being Egyptian and kind of looking different.
I think I read online that you said that playing Erica in Turner and Hooch was like your first time playing like an Egyptian character, right?
That's it. Yeah.
So that must have been kind of cool.
And it was originally I think Erica Jimenez. And I asked them after I got the role, I said, hey, would it be okay if this character was Egyptian?
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, we didn't even think about it. And then they came back, and then I had to explain, like, actually, they came with a name, and I was like, oh, culturally, that doesn't even represent my personal lineage. So can we shift it again? And so they came up with Erica Munir. And for me, that was just very edgy and shaky and raw and vulnerable to ask, because I'm of the mentality, I just do what they tell me to do. I play who they want me to play, and I'm trying to be the best at that so that I'm good at my job. It never occurred to me that I would be living a reality where I would be asking to represent my own race. And then like, that's also a weird question for me, because I was first generation Canadian. I was born and raised in Montreal of two immigrant parents who came to Quebec when they were dad was like 4, my mom was like 9. You know, so I was born in Canada and raised in Canada as a Canadian. At the time, both of my families, the mentality was to assimilate, to wash their culture and their language and their race, to just be accepted as Canadians, present as Canadians. And I didn't get to learn any of the languages of my grandparents. You know, it's like, so when it comes to race, it's funny for me because it's like I'm almost learning about what it would mean to be connected to my race in my 30s.
My father is also Egyptian, and he also immigrated over. Did a bunch of acting as a child, and I ran into a lot of the same things. Where it's like, oh, you could play Mediterranean, you could play this or whatever. I know that especially in the States, there's been a lot more conversation around hiring diverse, not only on camera, but off camera. I'm curious if you feel like America is kind of a little bit ahead of us on the way that they're willing to take those risks and prop up people of different life, like just different life experiences, whether it's race or sexuality or religion.
Yeah, it's hard to say, right? Because we were taught as Canadian children that Canada is a very inclusive, not racist, multicultural place. And that is what I always just parroted out of my mouth. Oh, well, Canada is Canada, you know, and there's like a lot of inaccuracy there. And we're finding out a lot about how intolerant Canada has been to certain cultures and races. But I think that the reflection of white people being the exports, the celebrity exports of Canada, is more about the global problem with like hidden racism. And I think that you guys and a new generation of creatives that are coming up now who got fed the story that we're inclusive and diverse, I think now we want to make good on that. You're like, I've believed this my whole life, what they told me. So now I'm like really interested in telling other people's stories. I would love to hear about like Ethiopian Canadians, because that was like there was a huge Ethiopian community in Montreal where I lived, and I was always fascinated. Or like Montreal Italians, like I want to know about them, you know, like or oh my gosh, Toronto has like I met this Haitian man, and he like opened this door into this world. And when I was in Toronto like 4 or 5 years ago, that I was like, this story needs to be told. Like this part of Canada is just gorgeous. And like, I feel like there is truth to what we were fed. There's some big inaccurate secrets of, you know, like the dark side of it too. And then I also feel like the goodness of our hearts and our storytelling is going to be the thing that course corrects, I think.
Somewhat comes down to money again, of like, is America ahead of the curve? Because I think they are in a lot of ways.
So let's say I wanted to make a show about my friend and his Haitian family. What you're saying is, in Canada, how it works is I'd go to the government grant site and I'd see what qualifies me for how much money and how can I fix this Tetris puzzle to get the money I would need to make a project. So how would I have to angle that? And by that time, you already have this thing created, instead of coming up with your thing and being like really committed to your story and the characters in it, or your idea, and then having that, and then pitching that, and it not filtering through like rules and regulations, but just like being able to bring and be awarded money, not based on these like formulas. Yeah. Does that make sense?
I like the fact that there's more risk taking in the States, where like, you can create your own project, it's your thing, and then you can shop that around to people and hopefully find someone who wants to honor what that vision is, instead of having to like filter your vision through someone else's parameters first.
That feeds into the risk tolerance, is that there's just more money in the States to take risk on things that might not pan out.
But I want to say one positive thing, which is that I think the Canadian struggle of it keeps us together and keeps us using each other for common goals, which gets lost when you're just like in an individual, if you make it or I make it, or, you know, there's like this separateness that exists here because of that. So I just wanted to like
And on a high
say
note.
there's and on a high note,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, I guess we'll leave it there. But
Yeah.
thank you so much again for
You're
coming
so
on.
good.
It's very nice
Thank
of you.
you for having me.
Thanks, Vanessa.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Bye. I really love that conversation. I'm so happy that she came on.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Vanessa, for taking out the time to speak to us.
The biggest thing that I came across when researching for this episode and also talking to Vanessa was just that there really is no separating American film industry from Canadian film industry. We also spent quite a bit of time talking about like bureaucracy and the Canadian industry's reliance on government grants. And just like a small point I wanted to bring up because I thought it was funny in this one essay I was reading about bureaucracy and Canadian celebrity. It was talking about like in the States, like a marker of celebrity is like how often you're in tabloids or on gossip blogs or being just like talked about. And in Canada, it's like, how often do you get government grants? How often does your name appear in the CMF annual report and the Canadian Council reports? Like that, like trading like gossip magazines for like paperwork. And I just thought that was kind of a funny way to look at it.
To Vanessa's point earlier is that it's not necessarily just the content that's being filtered through kind of the government parameters and grant parameters, but to a certain extent, you yourself as a creative are being filtered through that system. And thank you all for listening and checking in with us again this week. We hope you enjoyed our conversation with Vanessa. On the next week, Jaden, who do we have coming in?
Next week, we have Anna Kendrick on the podcast, which I'm very excited about. She's going to tell us all about her rigorous fight to reintroduce asbestos into Canadian public schools. So I'm looking forward to that conversation.
Okay, thanks everybody.
Thanks.
Goodbye.
Bye.